My family promised me $30K for my wedding, but when my sister got divorced, they used all the money on her lawyer and asked me to postpone my marriage. So I uninvited them and had the most perfect wedding of my life, surrounded by my real family. I'm 34 years old. I work in digital marketing, and 3 weeks ago, I married the love of my life in a beautiful wedding, surrounded by friends who felt like the real family I should have always had. But I need to tell this story because what happened in the last few months basically destroyed the relationship with my parents and my sister. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them for what they did. The thing is, it all started in the happiest way possible. I mean, James proposed to me like 8 months ago, and I was over the moon, you know? We'd been together 6 years, living together the last 3, and it was finally happening. My parents, Robert and Margaret, got super excited when we told them. My mom cried and everything, and my dad hugged James and told him he'd always considered him part of the family. They have a small bookstore downtown. They're basically retired but still go every day because they love it, and they've always been those people who value traditions and special moments. You know what I mean? That same night, after the celebration dinner they made for us, my dad pulled me aside and said, "Look, Emily, your mom and I want to help you with the wedding. We've been saving for this moment and we have like $30,000 set aside that are for you." I was in shock, honestly, because I never expected that from them. Like, I know they have money, but it's not like they're millionaires either. And $30,000 is a lot of money. I told him they didn't have to do that James and I could pay for it ourselves. But he insisted and said it was important to them, that I was their youngest daughter and they wanted to do this for me. My mom was there nodding with tears in her eyes, saying they'd dreamed of this moment since I was a little girl. Obviously, I accepted. I mean, who would turn down that help? And besides, they looked so happy to be able to do it that it would have been rude to say no. We started planning everything right away. James and I were super excited because with that extra money, we could have the wedding we really wanted instead of something super simple. We hired a coordinator, booked a beautiful venue for April of the following year, so like in approximately 8 months, started looking at vendors and all that stuff. My parents were involved in everything. My mom came with me to appointments to look at dresses. My dad asked about details and gave opinions about the menu. Everything was perfect. Literally couldn't ask for a more supportive family. And then, 1 month after James proposed to me, my sister Rachel announced she was getting divorced. Rachel is 36 years old, 2 years older than me, and had been married like 5 years to a guy who honestly I never liked, but it wasn't my marriage either, so I never said anything. Apparently things had been bad for a while. I hadn't noticed because Rachel and I aren't super close. We never really were. She was always a bit distant. A bit, I don't know. Like she was always competing with me for our parents' attention. You know? When she announced the divorce, I obviously told her I was really sorry and that I was there if she needed to talk, but she barely responded to me. What she did do was immediately move into my parents' house, literally packed her things in a week and settled into her old room. At first I thought it was temporary, like while she found her own apartment or something, but weeks went by and Rachel was still there. My parents didn't seem to have a problem with it. In fact, my mom told me Rachel was having a really hard time and needed family support. I understood. Of course, divorces are horrible and I don't wish that on anyone, but it's not like she was doing much to improve her situation either. Turns out Rachel had quit her job like a year before the divorce. Something about wanting to change careers but never really started anything new. And now she was completely financially dependent on our parents. When I asked her what plans she had, she'd tell me she couldn't think about that now, that she was too emotionally devastated. Things started getting weird when we were like 3 months into wedding planning. My parents started canceling appointments to look at things with me, saying Rachel needed them or they had to take her somewhere. Once they canceled cake tasting day because Rachel had an emotional crisis and my mom didn't want to leave her alone. I understood that time, but then it happened again and again, and I was starting to feel like the wedding was taking a back seat. James told me not to worry, that it was a temporary phase and my parents were still committed to helping us, but I had this weird feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away. 4 months after the engagement, my parents told me they'd hired a super expensive lawyer to represent Rachel in the divorce. Apparently, Rachel's ex had a very aggressive lawyer and they wanted to make sure she had the best representation possible. I asked them how much this lawyer cost, and my dad got uncomfortable and said not to worry about it, that they were taking care of it. That's when I should have asked more questions, should have pushed, but I didn't because I didn't want to seem selfish or insensitive about my sister's situation. The bomb dropped like 5 weeks ago. 3 weeks before writing this post, we were at a family dinner. Rachel was there, silently picking at her food like she always did now, and my parents looked weird, like nervous. Halfway through dinner, my dad cleared his throat and said, "Emily, we need to talk about the wedding." I thought he was going to say something about the final details or that they wanted to change something in the plan. But no, he told me, "We're not going to be able to help you with the money we promised." Just like that, no preamble. I froze with my fork in my hand and said, "What do you mean you're not going to be able to?" And my mom interrupted and said they'd had to use that money for Rachel's lawyer, that the divorce was being more complicated than they thought and the legal fees were super high. I couldn't believe it. Literally felt like they'd thrown a bucket of ice water on me. I told them, "But you promised me. We already booked everything. We already paid deposits. We already sent save the date invitations." My dad said they were very sorry. But Rachel was their daughter too, and she was going through a very difficult time, that she needed their help more than I did. My sister wasn't even looking at me. She was sitting there like the conversation wasn't about her. James, who was next to me, asked them when exactly they'd made this decision, and my parents admitted they'd been paying the lawyer for like 2 months but hadn't told us anything because they didn't want to ruin our happiness. I exploded. Couldn't help it. I told them how could they do this to me? How could they promise me something and then just change their mind without even consulting me? My mom started crying and saying I was being too harsh, that I didn't understand how difficult this was for them too. And then my dad dropped the real bomb. He said maybe we should consider postponing the wedding. That April was very close, and besides, Rachel was very emotionally fragile, and it would be very difficult for her to be at a wedding so soon. I just stared at him, unable to speak. Postpone my wedding because my sister was sad about her divorce? Like, I'm really sorry for her, but that had nothing to do with me. I told them there was no way we were postponing the wedding, that everything was already paid for and planned, and that we'd find a way to cover the $30,000 they'd promised. My mom said I was being selfish and insensitive, that I didn't care about my sister's feelings. And Rachel finally spoke and said she'd always known I was the favorite daughter, but this was the last straw, that I was rubbing my happiness in her face when she was destroyed. I told her that had nothing to do with it, that I wasn't to blame for her divorce and I wasn't going to put my life on pause for her. Things got horrible. We were all yelling. My dad saying I was a materialistic person who only cared about money. Me saying it was about the promise they'd made to me and it wasn't fair. James trying to calm things down, but also defending me because he could see I was right. In the end, we left. James and I got out of there, and I didn't speak to my parents for weeks. I was devastated. Honestly. Not just about the money, but about the betrayal of it all. They'd promised me something. They'd made me plan my entire wedding based on that money. And then they simply decided my sister's crisis was more important without even telling me until the last minute. And on top of that, they wanted me to postpone my wedding, as if my happiness didn't matter at all. James was incredible through all this. He told me we'd find a way. That the important thing was getting married and not the fancy wedding. We took out loans, used our savings. I cut some things from the original plan to make it cheaper, and basically we managed to cover everything. It was stressful and exhausting, but we did it. And the next thing I did was something I know was controversial, but I don't regret. When we sent out the formal wedding invitations, I didn't include my parents or Rachel. James asked me if I was sure, and I said yes, that I didn't want them there after what they'd done. I didn't want to walk down the aisle and see their faces knowing they'd betrayed me like that. My friends were shocked when I told them. Some told me it was too drastic, that they were my family and surely they regretted it. But most supported me and said I had the right to have the wedding I wanted, with the people who really supported me. My parents found out like 2 weeks later when someone, I don't know who, mentioned they'd received an invitation and they hadn't. My mom called me crying hysterically, saying how could I do this to them? That it was their only chance to see me get married. That they were devastated. My dad got on the phone and yelled at me that I was a vengeful, spoiled brat, that I was punishing them for helping my sister as if that were a crime. I told them it wasn't punishment. I simply didn't want them there after everything that had happened, that their presence wouldn't make me happy but the opposite. My mom kept sobbing in the background, saying how was she going to explain this to people? What would relatives say when they found out? A few days later, I got a long message from my mom, apologizing but also, and this is what made me angrier, saying I should understand they'd been in an impossible position, that we were both their daughters and they'd had to make a difficult decision. That yes, maybe they should have warned me earlier. But at the end of the day, I had James and a good job and was fine, while Rachel had nothing and needed them more. Basically, she was telling me that because I was better off then, I didn't deserve their help as much as Rachel. And then, and this still makes my blood boil. My mom said maybe I was being a bit materialistic, that a wedding shouldn't be about how much money you spend, but about love, and that if I really loved James, I wouldn't care about getting married at City Hall. Like, seriously? She was calling me materialistic after they promised me the money, after they encouraged me to plan a big wedding, after this whole problem had been caused by their decision to break their promise. I didn't respond to that message, didn't have the words. James told me it wasn't worth it, that we should focus our energy on the wedding and on us, not on them. I took like a week to really think about it, to consider whether I should invite them anyway, because at the end of the day, they're my parents and this was permanent. I talked to my best friend Sarah, who's been my rock through all, to this, and she told me to do what felt right in my heart, that no one could judge me for whatever decision I made. James told me the same thing, that he'd support me whatever I decided, but not to feel pressured to do something I didn't want. In the end, I decided no, I wasn't going to invite them. There was a part of me that was still hurt and angry, and another part that was simply exhausted from all the drama and didn't want that negative energy on my special day. And then my sister sent me a message. We hadn't spoken since that horrible dinner, not once. And suddenly I get this long text saying she'd heard I hadn't invited our parents to the wedding, and she just wanted me to know that even if she'd been invited, she wouldn't have gone anyway. She said she couldn't believe how insensitive I was, that I was rubbing my perfect relationship in her face when she'd just lost hers, that I was basically celebrating my happiness on top of her ashes. She literally said that, on top of my ashes. She told me she'd always known I was selfish, but this was a new level, and that she hoped I was happy ruining the relationship with our family for a stupid party. I didn't respond to her. Honestly, there was nothing to say. She clearly saw me as the villain of her story, and nothing I said was going to change that. But what happened next was the worst. What really sealed the deal that I'd made the right decision. 3 days before the wedding. 3 days. I start getting calls and messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, asking me what was up with an email my parents had sent. Turns out my parents sent a mass email to basically all the relatives, explaining that I'd uninvited them from my wedding because I was a gold digger who only cared about money, that I'd gotten angry because they couldn't pay for a princess wedding, and had decided to punish them for helping my sister in her time of need. I literally almost threw up when I read that email someone forwarded to me. They were painting me as this horrible, greedy, heartless person, when they'd been the ones who lied to me and broke their promise. I sent my own version of events to those relatives, explaining the whole real situation, but the damage was done. Some believed me, others didn't know what to believe, and a few sent me messages saying that regardless of everything, I should forgive my parents because they're my family. That phrase, "they're your family," I'd heard it like 1,000 times already, and honestly, I was sick of it because you know what? Family shouldn't treat you like that. Family shouldn't lie to you and betray you and then play victim. The wedding day finally arrived, and it was, against all odds, absolutely perfect. We got married at this beautiful venue with gardens. There were like 100 people there, all close friends and some relatives from my side who supported me, and obviously all of James's family. I walked down the aisle on Sarah's arm, who'd been my best friend since college and who'd been there for me through this whole mess. Some people thought it was weird that it wasn't my dad, but to me it felt perfect. She'd earned that honor much more than he had. James was there waiting for me with tears in his eyes. He looked so handsome in his gray suit, and when I got to his side, he whispered that I looked amazing. The ceremony was beautiful. Our friend David married us. We did our own vows, and I cried like a baby when James said his part about how I was the strongest person he knew and that he admired me for standing firm in what I believed was right, even when it was difficult. The reception was an incredible party. We danced, ate delicious food. Our friends gave beautiful and funny speeches. Sarah toasted to us and said something that still makes me cry when I remember it. She said that family isn't always blood, that sometimes family is the people you choose to have by your side, the people who support you unconditionally and who celebrate your happiness without conditions. Everyone stood up and applauded, and I looked around the room at all those people who'd been there for us, who'd supported us during difficult times. And I realized she was right. This was my real family. Throughout the whole night, I didn't think about my parents, or Rachel, even once. Well, I'm lying. I thought about them like twice, but only to realize I didn't miss them, that their absence hadn't ruined anything, but on the contrary, their presence probably would have caused drama and tension. James and I cut the cake, had our first dance as husband and wife, threw the bouquet and garter, did all the traditions, and it was magical. At the end of the night, when we were leaving the venue to go to the hotel, James carried me newlywed style and said, "We did it, my love. Despite everything, we did it." And he was right. We had done it. Now I'm here. 3 weeks later, writing this from the airport, waiting for our flight for the honeymoon. We're going to Italy for 2 weeks. I can't wait. My parents have sent me like 20 messages since the wedding, some apologizing, others angry, some trying to emotionally manipulate me, saying I'm destroying the family. My mom sent me pictures of herself crying on my wedding day, literal crying selfies, as if that was going to make me feel guilty. Rachel hasn't said anything else, but I know from a cousin, she's telling everyone, I'm a horrible sister. Some relatives have stopped talking to me. Others support me completely. And honestly, I don't even care that much anymore who's on which side. The truth is, I'm exhausted from all this, tired of the drama and the manipulations and being painted as the bad guy when all I did was refuse to be walked all over. James is now officially my husband. We're leaving for our honeymoon in 2 hours, and we're going to start our life together, surrounded by the people who really love and support us. I don't know if I'll ever forgive my parents. Honestly, right now, I can't even imagine having a relationship with them after everything that happened. That email they sent 3 days before my wedding was like the straw that broke the camel's back, you know? It showed they had no real remorse, that they still thought they were the victims and I was the villain. I guess life goes on, and eventually I'll have to decide what to do with this situation, whether to try some kind of reconciliation or just move forward without them. For now, I'm focused on my marriage, on my husband, on building our life together. They just called us to board. James is signaling me to put away my phone. Italy awaits us. And honestly, I can't think of a better way to start this new chapter of my life.